All right. Well, welcome to all of you today. And I'm so excited to have you join us for the Awakening Health Show and to meet my wonderful guest, Phil Escott. Phil's story has been so inspirational to me. And he tells his story in great depth in other YouTubes. So I'm going to ask him just for a short little synopsis, but I'm going to encourage you to go to those YouTubes to find out more about his wonderful background. But I have listened to so many people on the whole idea of the carnivore diet before I dove in. And Phil has been the most inspiring to me, the easiest to understand, and has such a profound background, not only with his own personal experience, but working with many people and also studying with many people, and many who I have tremendous respect for. So I'm excited to introduce Phil to you and um, to actually have an opportunity to pick his brain and his heart, because this is a man with a huge heart, a big spiritual background. And to me, that is so much the importance of what we're doing here, is to honor the wholeness of who we are, not just the physiology. So welcome to you, Phil. A big, warm welcome from my heart. I am so grateful you found the time to join us.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much. What an introduction. I'm blown away. I don't know what to say. That was really sweet, honestly. Thank you. That's lovely. I'm just some geezer who found out a few things.
I wish I could say even more, because I just am so touched by you and your background and your presentation. And I just want to quickly tell you all that part of why our lighting is so different is Phil's in England and he's not using electricity. He is lit right now by candlelight. And you all know about my focus on real light instead of native light. And we're in sunlight here in Austin right now while he's in his early evening there in England. But I've got my funny little glasses on because I'm in front of a computer. So, okay.
Yeah, I would have as well if I didn't have iris on the computer, so it kind of cuts the blue light anyway. So yeah.
Too.
Everybody's looking a bit orange these days when it comes to the evenings. Yeah.
I hear you. No, I have iris on too. I encourage everyone to use iris, and cool. Phil is obviously through his demonstration of it.
Anyway, yeah, thank you for that intro. I mean, that's sweet. I suppose I always say that I got to know most of the knowledge I did from just being much more stupid than most people, and having no willpower and getting even sicker. So it was from a point of becoming ridiculously ill at one point in 2010, where I got this sort of full-blown psoriatic arthritis and couldn't move by about this time that year. I suppose this is pretty much exactly my 8th anniversary of getting that sick. Wow. And from then on, I suppose I had to I had to really figure out how to get well. I thought, I'm just going to figure this out. And the first thing was, I can meditate my way out of this. I'm such a great yogi and all that nonsense. And then I thought, since I always was sort of a bit vegetarian brainwashed, and I thought, it must be, we go even more vegetarian. I must be vegan. I must be raw vegan. I must do all the juicing. And so I went down that route for a while, which was a bit of a disaster. And eventually, came around to the whole sort of keto way of eating. And then in 2015, I think dropped the last of the veg out. So on the diet side, I guess that's how it went. But having thought that I knew so much about diet and health, and even wrote a book on it all about Ayurveda and vegetarianism and exercise, and most of it was pretty good except for the diet section, which I've had to rewrite and to release it again. But so I thought I was a real expert, and I wasn't. I had a real big hefty dose of the Dunning-Kruger effect. I really thought I was a massive expert, and I was such an expert I didn't realize what an idiot I was. So it was,
like that. It's amazing.
yeah, it was a big lesson, you know, and it took me a lot of years to unwind, and I'm still unwinding it. You know, one thing that puzzles me in all of this health field is when anybody thinks they've really got it sorted,
Yes.
because all the time we're learning more, you know, and nature is is such a difficult thing to understand. We're not going to understand it because we're just little. It's like it's like one little circuit board trying to understand the whole of the internet. You know, it's never going to work. It's part of it. It's part of the hardware that goes with it. We're part of the whole unity of everything, and so we're never going to understand everything. We're not designed that way,
You know,
and so, you know, all we can do is just find a slightly better thing than we knew before, and keep going on and keep going on. And I suppose in the diet field, I've tried everything, I've done everything, and I find that some of the most educated people do end up fully carnivore because they tried everything and studied everything, and they're the only ones with either the desperation or the research to think, hey, it's actually okay, let's give it a go, and then the healing is amazing. But yeah, it's a fascinating subject, and I talk about it a lot. I talk about it a lot on my YouTube channel, but only because there's so much misconceptions built up around diet. You know, all the other sides of healing are just as interesting, if not way more interesting. But diet just has the most nonsense built up about it.
Phil, I wanted to interject here just one tiny thought in conjunction with what you're saying. And that is, I think the one thing that I've found is that our bodies are truly here to help us survive. They're our friends, and they are far wiser than our mind can ever be. And for me, I was a raw food vegan for 7 years, and 2 of them a fruitarian, and I ended up with colon cancer. And
Wow.
if that wasn't a slap in the face and a wake up call, and I realized that ism eating, no matter how spiritual I thought it was not the answer. We had to really start diving in and really listening to our bodies and our hearts and our souls, and really start being honest about what we were noticing and getting far more tuned in to the subtleties of our own biological functioning. And also to look at the emotional aspects of it all too, really deeply. And you know, our recall healing work has been amazing from that point of view, because it helps us to look at our connections with our ancestors and our, you know, our deeper line. But you know, it was an amazing wake up call with the whole idea of being the raw food vegan. And you know, I'm even it's kind of weird for me to call myself a carnivore right now, but it's just a way of explaining to people something different that I've finally gotten to after trying everything like you. You know, I mean, I even spent a year in California where I was hanging out with Agenus Vonderplanets and eating the Agenus way.
Did you? Cool.
And I just felt terrible on it. But I kept saying, I got it, you know, maybe it's just not enough time. Maybe it's just not enough time. And I kept pushing and pushing and pushing myself, even forgetting my own idea about really listening to my body and thinking, well, you know, there's it just got to be something here, that because so many people are getting well, but it wasn't the right thing for me. So I really want to encourage people to really consider what we have to say, and then really take it into your hearts and your bodies and see what's true for you, and realize that, you know, the last thing in the world I ever thought I would ever be is somebody who's eating steaks, you know, as a primary food. And of course, I had a lot of fish eggs and, you know, fish and all the rest of that. But it's like, oh my Lord, you know, steak is my primary food right now. And I grew up Jewish, and I'm even eating bacon. So I'm just willing to try, because I've tried everything to try and get my blood sugar down. and to deal with a bowel issue, which I've had loose stool all my life. And this seems to be the one thing that is helping to normalize all that. As a eating, no more than 20 to 50 carbs, I still had 120 to 145 blood sugar.
Mm.
And now it's, well, today it was 75 and yesterday 65. I mean, it's just such an amazing difference. And my ketones have even been like 3.5 or 4, checking them with a blood feeder. So, I mean, it's just been amazing. As in when I was doing the ketogenic diet, I was typically zero 0.5 or zero 0.2 even for my ketones. And here they are at 3 and 4. I mean, it's like, oh my Lord.
I gotta admit, it's years since I checked them. I've got a ketone meter somewhere, but
Mhm.
I don't, on carnivore. I've never actually checked them, to be honest. I never even think about it really. But yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I see these amazing results when the last of the plants are dropped out. It just seems absolutely crazy, but it seems to happen, and I understand. Yeah, once you're metabolically broken, like you've been, like I've been, you kind of lose your carb privileges, and a tiny little bit can set you off,
Yes.
which another person wouldn't even notice. I think there's an old expression, isn't there, that about bipolar people, that they're like everybody else, only more so. But I
Oh,
think
great.
this is also the same for somebody whose gut has become challenged as well.
Yes.
And they're like everybody else, only more so. I mean, I can tell if something's inflammatory very quickly. I mean, less so these days, but then I don't really know, because I've kind of lost my cravings, and I don't really tend to eat anything that's going to be inflammatory. And I find that was another thing that carnivory did, where it takes away the cravings. When you're on a keto diet and you have the occasional kind of stevia and things like that, it sort of keeps it bubbling under the surface. But the fewer of those cravings that you have, then the easier that thing is. And I suppose I don't know whether I would react to things now. I don't really have any desire to go and eat a loaf of bread and see what's going to happen. I just, any more than I'm going to eat a cushion or something. It's I don't regard it as food. But yeah, it's once I think the body's learned to do that, it never quite forgets. And so you've got to be more careful than other people. And then people say, oh well, of course, it isn't cured, is it? But then again, you say, well, that's like smashing your finger with a hammer and going, well, I can't wait until it heals up so that I can smash it again. It's why would you want to reintroduce the stuff that caused the problem in the first place? So it's funny. All other diets I've found, I don't like to think of them as diets, really, sort of ways of eating. All the other ones I've had trouble with this and that, and oh, I do. Have I had enough carb? Have I had enough fats? Have I not? It's just now it's so simple. You just eat a bunch of meat and fat, and you forget about it, and eating sort of recedes into the distance. It's not something that rules your day, and you go and have fun with something else. It's become so much of a recreation, hasn't it? So all of these recreational things that we think that we actually like I was talking to somebody about rice just now, and they're saying, well, I love rice. And say, well, you probably don't. You like the stuff that you put on the rice, the sauces, the fats, and that makes it palatable. You eat dry rice all day long, it's not going to be very much fun. And so people get conned into thinking they like a certain food and they can't do without it. And I say, just try it on its own. Like, get the stuff you used to put on the rice and use a spoon. It's easy enough. So yeah, but that whole healing process of the carnivory thing, I'm just becoming more and more convinced that it's ancestral food. Every culture's known about it. Taking it back to meat and fats, and somebody's sick, and bringing them back, and the other stuff that they ate. The tubers, the fruits. I think they ate them as fillers, to be honest, and I think they still do. They don't, I'm always saying it on probably every load of YouTube videos and interviews, but they don't celebrate when they bring back a fatted turnip, did they? In the Bible, it's not. It's the fatted calf, and ancestral tribes will always celebrate a kill, and that's what really feeds the tribe. So if you're really sick, it makes sense to go back to the food that our bodies crave the most when we're in a wild state. Most people, until they've got rid of their intuitions, they have no idea what their body craves, because they'll crave donuts and they'll crave chocolate and they'll crave, Coca-Cola and stuff. So that's not the natural signals of the body. So once we've got rid of those and we can see what it's doing, what it really wants, you can get the subtler cravings, and you can understand whether it wants lamb today, whether it wants fish today, whether it wants more fat today, a bit more protein today, and those are the kind of cravings you should be listening to. The other stuff, you see, people say, oh, all these ancestral tribes, they were fine on all these tubers and all these fruits and stuff. Of course they were, because they did everything else right, and they hadn't broken themselves with donuts and Twinkie bars. So, but once you've done that, the other stuff becomes less ideal too. So people think they were healthy because of all these root vegetables and fruit. I think they were healthy despite them. And I think that most of the time when we eat the fruits, it's for the benefit of the fruit tree anyway. They want the seeds scattered around, So I don't think it's really for our benefit. I think maybe there might be some circadian signaling to be eating local fruit when the season comes in. But you see, if fruit was as necessary as people say it is, there wouldn't be people who have done 10, 20 years on ribeye steak only and are in radiant health. They would be missing something by now, and they're not. But if somebody's healthy and they eat some fruit in season off a tree where they find it, it's not going to do them any harm at all. It's not going to break them. But once you're broken, the point is that it's probably best to leave plant matter out for a while. But it's so against all of the dogma that nobody notices. Nobody realizes that this is possible. The anger, the savagery that people to give you when you suggest such a thing is amazing.
I understand. Phil, I wanted to ask you, I have more background in these kinds of things than most people could ever imagine. I started in all this when I was 14, and I'm 66 now. But I did a lot of work with the GAPS diet with autistic children and their families for a while. And I was just wondering what you think about bone and meat broths. I guess we would keep the vegetables out and just use salt and make sure there's plenty of fat with the meat that was added to it. But do you think that is something that that's helpful for people when they're first coming into the carnivore diet, or just going directly into eating meat? And I was also wondering what you think about enemas, like coffee enemas, for people while they're going through the detoxing beginning phases. And maybe you could talk to us a little bit about people's entry into eating just fat and meat and salt and water. And teas, if you're okay with herbal teas as a beginning. I know a lot of people talk about doing their coffee with butter, that sort of thing in the beginning. And I haven't noticed you mentioning that on your website.
Well, the only reason I don't mention much about coffee is because I never got the addiction. So okay. I never really drank it ever. I'm not interested in it. My downfall is red wine, not coffee. So I'm more familiar with that. It always seems more recreational mistake to me than coffee. So I'll stick with that one. It's got more bang for its buck. Right. But about the GAPS thing, I think that's interesting, because I came to all of this through GAPS. It must have been about 2011 when I discovered Natasha Campbell McBride. and I think she really saved my life. It's funny, of all the people in this community, I've got to know quite a few of them, and I've met them. I've never had any contact with her. And I tell you, the first time I meet her, if I run into her, she's going to get the most massive. I love her. I do. I think she's ace. She's going to get suffocated. I think she's done so well for people. I'm going to give her such a hug. But I think. I remember listening to one of her videos and just thinking, just the way I remember her saying in that Russian accent, this beautiful fatty acid profile, about something. And I thought that's always stuck in my head, of just how she's talking about that. When I'd just come out the raw veganism thing, and I was thinking, she's talking about fats and stuff. It's beautiful. This sounds amazing. This is totally different. And it blew me away. And it really turned my healing around. And I think the bone broth thing, I always got into it, and I think it's great. And we still do it now. We have a slow cooker in the garage, and we boil it up, and I'll use the tallow off the top to cook steaks, and and I'll drink it occasionally, not that often, but maybe with lamb. You know, if we do some roast lamb, I'll mix it up with the tallow from the top and some butter and salt and pepper, and it makes perfect gravy, and you're done. Tip over the roast lamb, and I think it's great. But do I think it's essential? No, I actually don't. I hear Natasha's latest videos, and she's often talking now about fully carnivore, and she's making more of a sort of an emphasis on the fact that she's seen people eating just meat for a lot of years under her, you know, on the very first stage of GAPS, minus well cooked veg, and they're doing beautifully, she's saying, and she's also starting to talk about the plant toxins as well. So I think she's getting just as influenced as the rest of us are by experience and by, you know, Georgia Reed going on about it, and anything you can't fail to notice it. All the, you know, the people coming out about plant poison. So is it necessary? Well, I see so many people having amazing results without ever touching bone broth.
Great.
I don't know if it's necessary. It might be great for some people, might have some healing things. I look at the work of Csaba Tott and Zofia Clements of Paleomedicina in Hungary, you know, where they're doing this Paleolithic ketogenic diet, which is very high fat, very sort of compared to the protein, and they're having like 100% success rate with people who are 100% compliant with the diet, and they're not using bone broths. I think it might have more to do with the fact that it's just a very high fat diet and not so much protein and absolutely zero plant matter. I think that is the key when you're really sick. I think, you know, people who are athletes, who don't have so much to reverse, then they're sort of cutting the fats a bit more and upping the protein more, and they seem to be doing great on that. When you're very, very sick, I think the high fat thing is important. I think then maybe ketones are important because they're calling it Paleolithic ketogenic diet. I don't check them anymore, but I think that's what's going on there, and I think the GAPS diet in stage 1 is that basically. So that's why it's having these wonderful effects. Both of them are.
But Phil, she does also seem to recommend using things like onion and garlic and celery and, you know, those sorts of things to make the bone broth. Do you think that's a problem? And then also, I was curious about people who have things like parasites. I haven't heard you ever mention anything about doing any kind of supplementation. And I'm wondering if you do any supplementation, if you believe that, like Agenus, that those parasites are only there because we need them to deal with certain imbalances that we have, and they will leave on their own accord when they no longer are needed and when they no longer have anything to eat that they want. And I do believe the carbs are the primary thing that attracts them in the first place, besides, you know, just all the inflammatory conditions that are going on in the body. But I'm just curious about if there's any supplements that you use, if you feel like it's appropriate. Like I'm also a homeopath, so I tend to treat everything, including myself, while I'm doing this, with homeopathic remedies. And I'm wondering, you know, how you feel about adding anything like that, or herbs, or whatever, vitamin A, D. I mean, like fermented cod liver oil, which to me is a food. You know, are those sort of things part of your recommendations, or if you just do the diet, period?
Well, you know, I spent a lot of time looking into all sorts of stuff like that. I've done tons of research into it, done tons of experimentation. I've taken every supplement under the sun. I've done every enema under the sun, you know?
Yeah.
I've done all of this stuff. And what I found when going fully carnivore was that, well, as the more I moved away from plants, the fewer of those other remedies I needed. And I sometimes wonder if these plant remedies are just there to mop up the damage we've done with other plants. I mean, Natasha Campbell McBride, she did originally say onions and garlic and all that sort of thing, and put very well cooked vegetables into the broth. But I've heard her say that she's had people on just meat, people who are very sick, they're on just meat and just broth, and they're doing incredibly well. And she also more and more is, like I say, talking about the problems with veg. So I think when she wrote the book, I think she's moved on from there. It's like when I wrote my book, I was still saying, yes, have some non-starchy veg. If I could write the book again, I'd be saying I wouldn't even bother with them because we don't need them. They were never in our diet. You know, broccoli and cauliflower never existed. It just isn't, you know, and loads of spinach is just going to give you kidney stones. I've been there. Agony. And if meat gave you kidney stones, I'm prone to them. I'd certainly have had some over the past 3 years, and I've had none. But I did when I was juicing spinach, you know? So it's the oxalates in the plant. So I think that the supplements, well, all I say to people really is if they know, you see, I do know about a lot of that side of stuff, but I don't tend to talk about it because I don't think anybody really understands it. Because some people who've studied it for decades, they'll say completely the opposite to somebody else who studied it for decades. Do you see what I mean? So I think, again, there's something in all of these, but I would say, yes, go and work with a naturopath because I think they're ace. You know, I have a friend, Gabby Forrester, who really turned me around in sort of about 2011, and she's still a friend. I was just chatting to her today, and she's wonderful. And you know, she has knowledge of all that side of things that I don't have knowledge of. But and so that's not really my area of expertise, because I think the things that worked best for me were the things that were subtracted, not the things that were added. Those were the most powerful, you know, which is why I could, you know, you were mentioning that course before we came on, the subtraction method that I just released yesterday. We won't get into that, but it's all about subtracting things, you know, and those are the things that really, really work the best. And I see people going further and further they go away from plants, the further they go into carnivory, the fewer supplements they tend to take. The supplements they do take are usually to do with electrolyte problems. So they'll be taking some kind of mixed electrolyte, or they'll be taking some magnesium, or they'll be taking extra sodium. And I find that useful. You know, I seldom get it anymore, but I had I had a few cramps a couple of weeks ago, and I thought, oh, maybe I'm just down on sodium. Took some salt water, you know, and a bit of magnesium. They've gone. And so sometimes, you know, something like that might happen. I don't know what I did to cause that, but it's something that really doesn't usually happen past the adaptation phase. But I must have been a bit dehydrated somewhere. But, you know, this whole new thing about deuterium coming out and the depleting of deuterium in the cell, to me, again, it points to everything that worked for me also coincides with what depletes deuterium. You know, getting sunlight, cutting artificial light, getting up on your animal fats, cutting out the carbs. All of these fall into the realm of depleting deuterium, and that seems to be at the root of all this aging and chronic disease. And so, what I like to stick to is telling people what to subtract. Yes, I know about a whole load of supplements and things like that, and I think they might be very useful. But I say to people, unless you really know you have a deficiency, you're going to buy a whole house worth of supplements and probably never nail the problem. You know, since most of them get passed through anyway. And as they say in paleomedicine, most of them are pretty high deuterium anyway. So unless you really know what you need, you're stuffing these supplements in and creating a deuterium problem. But the people who need the supplements the most are the ones with the least absorption. And I think actually in the end, it's more of an absorption issue. So I figure taking all these supplements, doing enemas, I mean, I did hundreds, literally. And they did provide short-term relief to inflammation because I was clearing out the crap that I was putting in at the other end. Yeah. So you know, if the people up their absorption, then they're going to be getting probably all they need from the food anyway, because they didn't before. And so all these recommended daily allowances are built on people who are carb eaters. And so, you know, like, you know, that old experiment, it's wonderful. That experiment they did with oysters. They split a group of people into, and they gave one group just oysters to see how the zinc levels went up, and the zinc levels shot up. And then they gave the other group oysters and black beans, and the zinc levels didn't move. And so, you know, the black beans are an anti-nutrient, sucking everything out, stopping the absorption in the gut. So it's not, again, it's about what you subtract. So I think it's a matter of upping the absorption. But I'm not one of these people that slams homeopathy or naturopathy or anything. I think there's tons of valid stuff in there. But I think it has to be applied by somebody who really understands how to apply it. But also some, if you're getting into minutiae like that, probably some kind of testing to really see if you do have a deficiency before you start piling stuff in, because otherwise it's just guessing, and we're always second guessing the body. And like you said, the body's wiser than any of us.
Sure is. It sure is. Bill, along those lines, I'm always looking for ways. If you went into my kitchen, it's like I have so many things out everywhere, and now I've got things like I'm just kind of putting it all away because I had so many herbal supplements, and I probably have 100 different loose leaf types of herbs, teas, and dried berries, schizandra berries, gymnostemma, all this kind of stuff that is wonderful herbal teas for supporting the body and all that kind of thing. But I've been playing with plankton as a source of minerals because I used to do lots of seaweeds. Jack, highly recommended seaweeds for getting our iodine needs and our basic minerals. But I believe plankton has all of that, and it's actually an animal, a microscopic animal. But I'm just wondering what you think about plankton as a possibility for, and if you have anything to say about seaweeds, if that's one of those things that fits into the plant world or not, or if it has a special dispensation because it comes from the ocean. But I just, I'm in a huge subtraction mode right now, because literally, when I would make tea, I probably could sit there and just kind of have fun and which one and test this and that and the other on myself and put together as many as 15 herbs in a pot of tea. So my life has become so much easier. Yeah, oh, I hear somebody singing in the background.
This is Peter. He's come to say hello. This is Grace. Don't blow the candles out. They won't see it.
What a beautiful smile you have. Wow.
Oh, that's my youngest. That's Peter. He's 3.
Hi, Peter.
Hi, how old are you?
That's very rude.
How old are you?
How old am I? I'm 66, and my son is 42.
And the moon is 10.
That's his sister.
Ah.
See you later, sweetie. Yep. Yeah, the camera's on. That's we're having a chat. Thanks. See you later. Great. Yes. Where were we? I've forgotten. Oh yes, herbal teas and stuff. Yeah, I don't know, because again, I never really got that addiction. I used to drink them, and I never really liked any of them, and so I used to think, we used to call them terrible things. Actually, I can't even mention. I was just about. I'm probably better not, because it's very un-PC what we used to call. But yeah, I used to, and there's some sitting in there, and I just don't. I never got into them, but I think, and plankton and seaweed. Well, I don't know anything about plankton. I don't see why not. But then again, how much of it did we eat? I still, if I'm ever asked a question like that, I just go, well, would we have eaten it? How would we have ever got it out of the water? Whales are equipped to get it out of the water, and I'm sure it's a perfectly good food. It's a natural thing there. It's not going to do us any harm. Is it necessary? Is it a superfood? I guess it's a superfood for whales. So and seaweed. Yeah, well, I think it's probably the safest plant to eat year round, because it's there, all year round. Pretty much, you can find seaweed. So it's something that we would have been able to eat even in the winter if we were by the coast. But do we absolutely need it? I know Jack was hot on it at one time. I haven't heard him mention it for a while, and from seafood and oysters and stuff, you're getting iodine anyway, aren't you? So I prefer to get things from animal sources. I feel so much better when things are from animal sources. Hello. And this is Amelia. Come to say hello. This is my daughter, Amelia.
Hi.
Hi, it's good to see you.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to our show.
Yay.
So yeah, I just prefer to get things from animal sources now. I just feel better. But seaweed, yeah, is it going to break anybody? Absolutely not. Is it necessary? I'm not sure. I mean, I think people do have a lot of problems with iodine, but I think iodine gets pulled out of us by loads of other things, all the anti-nutrients. I mean, I've got a little video on YouTube about my mom's breast cancer, and there's pics on there of how the tumor disappeared. It was coming right through the skin, and then we put her on we had her on a pretty much a carnivore diet, except the only vegetable matter she had was a few berries and some yogurt every now and again. Mm-hmm. But pretty much 100% meat apart from that. And she was 93 at the time. This was a couple of years ago. And she hadn't told me about this lump. She probably had it for years and never even mentioned it. But then it probably got uncomfortable. And she showed it to me. And it was starting to go purple and come through the skin by the time she told me. Yeah. So then we went down, had the diagnosis, blah, blah, blah. I said, treatment, no thanks. And we went back and I said, are you willing to give it a go naturally? And she went, yeah, absolutely, great. So off we went with it, sorted out the light environment, this and that. And we put her on cannabis oil, but she, 93, and she was getting stoned every day. She got a bit sick of that. It was actually reducing the tumor. And the oncologist was amazed. But when we took her off the cannabis oil, that was probably a little icing on the cake that kind of had it increasing again, and I was at a loss. But then I put her on this iodine protocol. So I gave her Lugol's iodine, tapering up to 10. I think it was 7% iodine. Yeah. 10 drops a day for 3 months. And I'd read about it. It was just something I'd read about. But I did try the meds. We tried them for a couple of weeks, and they said, "Oh, there'll be no side effects." And I said, "Yeah, right, okay." Anyway, her legs got so wobbly she fell over and broke her wrist. So I said, "Right, enough of that. We'll forget about that. Put her on this iodine protocol." It wasn't, within 2 weeks you wouldn't be able to tell, but it was just side effects, and I couldn't see any advantage to it. So we got this iodine dose drop, just tapered up to 10 drops a day for 3 months, and then tapered it down again and just kept her on a drop a day. Now I did read somewhere that it never worked during those 3 months. And so you'll think it's not working, but just be patient. And like literally 3, 4, 5 months afterwards, suddenly it'll disappear. I'd honestly forgotten about it. And I thought, okay, maybe we can stop it with the carnivore diet and sorting out her light and getting her out in the sun. She hadn't been out in the sun since the 60s. And I'd be pushing her out in the back garden and taking as many clothes off as I can to get her in the sun. Right. Get her grounded, all of these things. And I thought, well, maybe we'll keep it at bay with that, but I might have to go back to the surgeon and have this cut out on a local anesthetic because it's getting to be ulcerating, it's going to ulcerate through the skin. And I kept waiting for her to complain about it. She didn't. I kind of forgot about it. One day she said, it's going away. And I said, are you serious? Let's have a look. And it was the skin had almost gone back to normal. And you can see the pictures on YouTube. If you put my name in and breast cancer, you can see it. It's only a little 5-minute talk taken from another whole talk I did to some docs and health professionals. But there's all sorts of different sections to it. But this was a section on her. And with her permission, she let me put, it's funny sort of putting pics of your mum's boobs up at 93, and pointing to it on a screen. It was kind of weird, but I said to her, I think it's going to help people. So, and she was happy about that. So anyway, it was quite amusing. But so it did, yes, and it disappeared, the tumor was going right down inside as well, but the skin all came back to normal. You can see that on the photos. Vegans, of course, they accused me of having swapped the pictures or photoshopped it or something, like I'd swapped it around, saying that it was the other way around because you can never eat meat and heal cancer. So they said that quite a bit on YouTube. But so then it started coming out. It would have been nice to have seen how it resolved. But she died earlier this year, a couple of bouts of pneumonia in a row, and it just got her so weak, and she didn't come through that. But it wasn't the cancer that killed her. And it was such a shame because I'd like to have seen in the years afterwards how it would have completely disappeared if it would, or if it would have just left a small lump or whatever would have happened. It would have been a fascinating journey. But it's a fascinating journey anyway to see it almost. Well, we saw the lump sort of go down from about 6 centimeters to about 4, 3 probably by the end, and all the skin come back to normal. So it was obviously on its way. It was beautiful to see. So, yeah.
So, I want to just get clear. Your mom was on a carnivore diet.
Yeah.
You had her in the sun. She had some berries and things once in a while and yogurt. But other than that, she was on a carnivore diet. You introduced her to sun and to grounding, right?
Yeah.
Did you do any sauna therapies or thermogenesis of any kind?
No.
Any
She was very, very frail. I thought of throwing her in a cold bath, and I thought, no, she's probably not gonna do that. We tried a ton of things. We tried all the mushrooms, the cordyceps, reishi, all of that. We tried. Yeah, I can imagine. We tried Essiac tea.
Yes.
We tried the apricot kernels. We tried all of that at the same time as we've tried the cannabis oil, and I don't know really what worked. It seemed to be the cannabis oil, but because it's cancer and you get that sort of freak out, and you just hit it with everything all at once. I didn't really care about research with what individual one was doing. I just wanted to get it gone. But it was the iodine. I'm pretty sure because we pretty much cut everything out, and it was still growing.
So you used 5% Lugol's, or
I think it was 7. I think it was 7, about 10 drops of 7 by the end every day.
in the United States, they actually made it really difficult you have to have a prescription to get 5%. I've never seen.
No, crazy. Yeah, I've seen 12, 7. I've seen all sorts, but I bet there's no strict dose. I bet it's just take it up for 3 months. And then, obviously, if you're going to be drinking a bottle a day, you're going to be in real trouble.
Oh, right.
But, 10 drops of something a day, 5-10 drops for 3 months, not going to kill anybody. If they've got something that is with an iodine deficiency, and some of those hormonally driven breast tumors are very often to do with iodine and that kind of ballpark. It's like when women. Jack told this story when women have lots of fibrous matter. What it's called?
Fibrocystic breast.
Fibrocystic breast syndrome. Yeah. There's a blog post on my website actually with a good friend of mine, and she had that, and they said she had more lumps than they'd ever seen, and she just started taking a bit of iodine, putting iodine on topically, which we did to my mum as well, and they just cleared up. And Jack said about that. Jack remembers a story early on in medical school where he was. He saw that happen. He saw a doc do that. So a woman's breast was so tender they couldn't even examine it, and he just painted a load of iodine on, said, give it half an hour and we'll go back, and she was fine with being examined. And it's always been connected to breast health. So I just took a wild guess and did it. But these are the kind of things you've got to do, and then you get called your dangerous snake oil salesman and all that. But it's a hell of a lot safer, to be honest, a little bit of controlled iodine than some of these, all of these awful drugs that get given. So I don't think it's dangerous or snake oil or anything, and it worked. So,
well, are you familiar with Dr. Gerson's work?
Yeah.
So he always had everyone with cancer taking different amounts of Lugol's. That was part of his protocol.
Yeah, cool.
In addition to juice fasting and coffee enemas and all that sort of thing. But that was a big thing for him was the Lugol's. And of course, Natasha had us painting the Lugol's on every child and, drawing pictures on their bellies and stuff with iodine. And something that because we have so many problems here with fluoride and in the water, we have everybody put a little bit of iodine on their skin after they get out of the shower.
Yeah.
Recommending different locations depending upon where their inflammatory conditions are, like armpits and the thyroid itself, or the arm or the belly or whatever. So, and moving it around.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of these things like magnesium that we just get so depleted. from,
I was
because
wondering how you brought her up. Was it every 5 days you would increase, or how long did you go between, going from 1 drop to 2 drops and all that?
you know what, I can't remember. I think we just kind of gave her a drop for a couple of days, and then increased it to 2 for a couple of days, and just watched for any sort of digestive issues or any problems, and there weren't any. So, every couple of days we'd increase it by a drop until it got to 10. Please, if anybody's listening, don't take this protocol as gospel, because I got it from the internet, and I did get it from somebody who I cannot remember, and I wish I could have looked for it since.
Mhm.
But I remember getting it from a doc who does treat and get very good results with these kind of hormonally driven tumors with this iodine protocol, this sort of 3 months of loading and then coming back down again. And I don't remember where I got it. I've been searching for it, and I can't find where I got it. But this is what I found. So please do your own research. Don't take this exact protocol from me. I'm not a doctor. I'm not anything. I got lucky. I don't think 10 drops a day for 3 months is going to kill anybody. But it's something we did with a considered move after doing lots of other things, and it appeared to work. But whatever it did, whether it was a combination of all the things we did, I don't know. But certainly meat did her no harm.
Well, you know what I love about this, and I've seen this, and I've worked with this with hormones with women many times, where what we would do is what you did. We would slowly titer up to a full dose, leave the person there long enough for their bodies to get the message that this is what we want, and then you slowly titer down.
Yeah.
And that teaches the body to do what it needs to do. It says, here's something you forgot, or here's something because of life it's been difficult for you to do. We're going to give you some support and help to remind you about it. And you're not shocking the body by putting them on 10 drops right away, but you're slowly building them up, keeping them there for a little while, for at least 1 moon cycle. So if you have a whole moon cycle, that allows the body to get a sense through all the different subtleties that happen during the moon cycle that we are not aware of. And then we take them back down again. And I guess you're saying 3 months. So that would even take you pretty much through a season. And then you titer back down again and say, let's see if the body liked that enough to want to do it. And if a 93-year-old woman has the capacity to do it, well, my goodness, most of us, if we aren't getting in the way by doing so many other things that absorb the benefits, then we have a pretty good chance of making it work.
Absolutely. I think what worked so well with my mum was she had, it wasn't that it's difficult to describe my mum. She had a really easy life. Somebody was always looking after her.
Yeah.
Whether it was her parents or my dad or me, when my dad died in 2003, which was an unnecessary death at the hands of overprescription.
Yes.
But if she had an attitude where she just sort of let go. She had a bit of surrender to her. As far as her own health went, never sort of really worried. Like, she had a stroke in '96 and lost quite a lot of her speech. When she was on statins, I'll add, when we got her cholesterol nice and high, after that, we got the statins in the bin. No more events like any strokes or any problem like that. Got the LDL nice and high, scary high for the doctors. I said, nope, that's exactly where it's supposed to be for a woman of her age. Leave her alone. And she never had another event. But, she had a load of trust in whoever was saying, how about this, basically, whether it was me or my dad or docs or whatever. So she kind of let go into it, and she didn't have any worry about it particularly, unless it hurt her. So I think that was part of the attitude why it was kind of easier to work with her in a way. She didn't do anything for herself. It's not like I told her this stuff and she did it. She dragged her heels, and she was terrible with it. I'd get her, I'd go around and find her staring at the telly with the LED lights on and whatever. Say, Ma, listen, put the orange light on, put your shades on. And then, oh yes, I forgot. It wasn't like she actually took any active participation in her healing. To be honest, it just shows what you can do.
Yeah.
But I think the thing was that she didn't really freak out about it. A lot of people really freak out about it. There's so much fear built up around cancer. I don't know if you've ever heard of a woman called Anita Morjani.
There's some really beautiful research that was done by Dr. Reiki Hammer doing CT scans of people without contrast. And he could show that when you go to see an oncologist who gives you the message that you have cancer, that it creates a spot on the brain that is bigger than the spot that's on the brain for the cancer.
Yeah.
Really amazing. And that the most toxic thing we can do is to believe the doctor's proclamation, and typically something that goes along with it that, if you don't do what we tell you to do, you're going to die a miserable death in, a certain amount of time, which is what they told me. They said, if you don't do what we tell you to do, you're going to die a miserable death within 3 months. And I just got furious and went off on them and asked who made them God, and went home and never went to see the doctor again. And, did my natural treatments, which was Dr. Kelly's work at the time. But, it's just amazing to me that we have vilified something to such an extent that research is showing that almost all of us have cancer 6, 7, 8 times in our life. And our body just takes care of it.
Yeah.
And if we learn how to be in tune with nature, our bodies will take care of these sorts of things.
Yeah.
And that there's a very clear message in every one of these tumors that has to do with an emotional imbalance or some incomplete piece from our ancestors, and we're completing it. And we can complete it without having any symptoms or anything, just by doing the inner work,
Oh, definitely. I think it all goes hand in hand. But I was saying there was this lady, Anita Morjani. She wrote a book, I believe it's called Dying to Be Me, was it?
Yes. Uh-huh.
I mean, her story is amazing, where she was, if people listening don't know her story, she was on death's door, tumors all over the place, completely sarcopenic, all the muscles wasted, only expected to last a few hours in a coma, relatives gathering. And then she had this kind of awakening experience wherever she was, and decided it wasn't all over, came back into the body, and a few weeks later there was no evidence of any cancer. And it's one of the most amazing, what people call spontaneous remission stories. I don't believe it's spontaneous at all. You've got to look into either a big change that somebody's made in something. And her story is great, because there was one interview with her, with my friend Rick Archer, who does Buddha at the Gas Pump.
Uh-huh.
And I've done an interview with Rick for Buddha at the Gas Pump. And I've always been a great fan of it. I love it. And his interview with Anita, it was great, because I believe he asked her, what do you think is the root of this cancer epidemic? And she said, fear of cancer.
Yes.
And it was, in everything, this is carcinogenic, that's carcinogenic, this is going to give you cancer. And mostly it's a wrong information about what's going to give you cancer. What's actually going to give you cancer is staring at the screen that's telling you that meat's going to give you cancer, not the meat, And so we've got it all completely the wrong way around. So when we do get cancer, we panic, we freak out, we get given 6 months to live, and we're dead in 2 weeks. We probably had it for 8 years, where the body's been ticking over with it. So it's absolutely crazy, this fear of cancer. I get, when people come to me, somebody comes to me with diabetes, it's just like, oh, you just laugh. You just go, oh, well, this is going to be easy. This is going to be no problem at all. Somebody comes to me with autoimmunity, okay, you've messed up. This is going to be a bit tricky, but we can do it. Somebody comes with cancer, I get kind of nervous, because there's so much built up around it, where it's blasphemous to say that somebody could get rid of it, or to give them a good kind of hope, to give them a good view of saying, well, you've messed up, but if you get everything right, the body can deal with this. Whereas, you go into the oncologist, they go, well, like you say, you've had it in 4 months. I mean, how is that walking out? That just means they don't know how to cure it. So, it's the magic of everything all at once, the diet, the light, the emotions, everything, and we all keep focusing on one thing. And I ended up talking about carnivory just because I just, everybody argues about it. It's funny, isn't it? You can say to somebody, well, Wi-Fi's a bit dodgy. That's interesting. Yeah, I can see how that would disrupt the mitochondria, the magnetism and whatever. And bright lights, you think of chickens, you put the lights on all day, then they lay all day. Of course, light affects everything, the circadian biology. So put a screen on your television, put some blue blocking shades on, you'll sleep better, use some candles. Oh, that's interesting. And then, okay, well, try eating just meat and fat and dropping the plants out. Oh, fuck off.
I hear you. I'm going to just leave the door and wish has some patience.
Yeah, sure.
So, Phil, I wanted to mention with the recall healing piece, just to give you a little bit of idea of how different things are. We look at breast cancer starting out with the body trying to make a super strong milk, extra milk to nourish somebody that you felt you haven't been able to nourish. So, for instance, if your mother's cancer began to grow when her husband died, it would be her body's attempt to nourish him. And she would then produce this extra powerful milk and then grow this extra breast tissue to be able to nurture more and give more where she has a loss. And so people do this all the time. Like this one woman's story was she gave birth to a child when she was very young and had very little money. And she used to shoplift and put food so she'd be able to nurse her baby into her bra. And the anniversary of that time, which was, I think, maybe three times the age she was at when she gave birth to this child, she got a breast tumor. And when she remembered about that particular experience, the tumor went away. So it was a anniversary of remembering the attempt to nurture her baby and the challenges around that. And oftentimes people get a breast cancer on the nurturing side. For many women, left is the primary nurturing side, having to do with the loss of a child's love or the loss of a child. And on the right side, the loss of a partner, a business partner. And once that issue is resolved, the tumor goes away. It's just drawing your attention to some work that we need to do. It's not about something that's going to necessarily kill us.
That's incredibly interesting. In fact, you've given me an insight into something there that I didn't actually consider. That's very cool, because it was on the left-hand side, and I was looking after her from 2003 till she died earlier this year. And it was, we had a real difficult relationship. We were very close, very intertwined. It was one of those very karmic relationships.
Yes.
But it was a lot of the time, it was a very critical kind of a woman, just always having a go, at somebody. And we were in the same house as her. Well, I was in the same house as her. We had a big house where she had the middle floor and we had the top floor and the bottom floor. And then I met my partner. You've met the kids now. And Amelia was born in 2008. And my partner is a saint. She put up with anything. But my mum was very, very difficult to live with. And I was also thinking, I was taking care of her, but I was feeling very trapped, and we used to have a lot of arguments. We'd have a lot of rows. Yeah. And she was definitely feeling like she didn't have a kid anymore, because the roles get reversed in that time, where she was unable to look after herself. And you've just thrown a whole completely different light on it, because for me, it was interesting. From my side, it was look for the thing that you're trying not to run away from, that sort of ankle thing. And the ankles was the worst for me. I could hardly walk on them. And then when we came into this house 2013, I'd calmed them down with a keto diet and whatever, but they were still pretty painful some days.
Yes.
And two weeks after we moved in here in 2013, while other joints were still affected. The ankles healed up completely and utterly, and never came back. Not another hint of it. Now, any rheumatologist will say that's nonsense, because just sometimes you can tap these things out, you can do all this work on it, and it's still, the issue is you just got to get out the damn house, you know? Yeah. And then I could look after her better. She was in a smaller place on her own. We were in a different place. We had space for the family. It was great. So then we got on better and whatever. But that tumor was probably already growing back in 2013 when we moved out. And then she still never got, because when I was a kid, yeah, she was very smothering as a mother.
Yes.
And so then later on in life, when she probably wanted to do that, but she didn't have the capacity to do it anymore. And now she had to be looked after by her son. And it's really interesting. I think you've actually made a really huge connection there for me. And I'm going to have to go and ponder on that one, because I figure out a lot of these little connections, but there's so many that come up. You never know who's going to bring them to you and whatever. And these people who go, oh, that's nonsense. I mean, I think the one thing that just winds me up is people who have no inquisitive mind. You know, we have no idea about this universe. How can anybody who's been alive 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, or even 80 or 90 years have any idea about this universe, really? You know, you can just go from one illusion to the other that causes you slightly less discomfort than the previous illusion. Yeah. You know? So, and once you're aware that that's what you're doing, you can move on. You can move on, you know? But well done. I'm going to have to go ponder that one. That's really interesting. That might well have been what it was. And then you see, you can attack things on other levels. Like you can do the iodine thing. People go, oh, the iodine thing. But it might also have been due to the fact that I know that I really softened towards her when I found that she had the cancer. Yeah. So then she had more of a family member and a son, which was also definitely part of the healing process. Because I'd make sure that I'd go around there, instead of just sort of taking care of her, saying, yeah, how you doing and whatever, I'd actually go around there, give her some big hugs and stuff and change the attitude. Because suddenly you think, however much you haven't got on, this might be my last year or two with this person. You know, so sort of value that. And so that's the side of it as well. You know, you end up talking about the carnivore diet and the iodine, and it has all its place on that wheel of health. But what you're talking about there is the real root of it, the real magic that I'm really, really fascinated with. And I'd much rather talk more about. You know, I have this Facebook group with 6,000 people on now. I only started for 10 people in January.
Wow.
6,000 people now. Lots of great docs on there, all sorts of beautiful people, really experienced carnivores and whatever. But it's called 100% Carnivore and Beyond, because I want to get into all this other stuff. And even among carnivores who are very open-minded, some of this sort of thing is too far for them. And so I have this other group, I think, I don't know, 200 or 300 people. This is my friend Tracy Redding. She had she's wonderful too. And she had an idea to set this one up. So I did with her. And it's called Beyond the Beyond, so that we can actually talk about this stuff without other people going, don't be silly, it's all about eating meat. It isn't. Okay. Wow. It's about all of this stuff. It's about all of this stuff. So that's wonderful. Thank you. That's fantastic. I love that. We've actually recorded this, you bringing me this absolutely marvelous insight into my mum, because that makes a hell of a lot of sense.
Well, I'd also love to encourage you to go to our website. It's awakeninghealth.com. And in the media section, you'll find all of Richard's YouTubes. And he's done some fabulous ones on recall healing. And, you know, for him, it's where it's all what it's all about. He really feels that our bodies are constantly healing, and we're living in this place of fear, and we don't understand it, and we don't see it. And if we just can start to really see what the body, the biology is speaking to us, we can go looking in more deeply. And he talks a lot about how we can do that. And then there's also this whole ancestral piece, the cycles, and how the DNA of incomplete emotional events gets passed on to us. Mm-hmm. And depending upon our birth order, we take on a chunk, 1/3 of the issues, so that nobody's overwhelmed in the family tree. So, and like if you're the first child or the second child or the third child, that would be 1, 2, 3, and 4 would come under 1, and 5 would come under 2, and 6 would come under 3. So we'll take on a chunk of the family's history to try and complete things. And Richard was really going deep into his ancestry and discovered that I think it was his great-great-grandfather was drunk one day, and he just, back in the days when there was a tremendous amount of racial tension. And there was a Black minister who was at the store that the great-grandfather was at, and he told the minister to dance for him, and he wouldn't do it, and he killed him. And he wasn't punished for it or anything. And interestingly enough, Richard's father, after his wife died, he married a second woman, but the third woman he married, he got this very strong message that he was supposed to marry this woman who was a Black minister in in the community. And she had children, and she was like 25 years or maybe even 30 years younger than him. And he was already in his 80s, and he kept convincing her until she finally married him. And he died during the time he was married to her, and all of his inheritance, his house that the kids grew up in and everything, went to her. And the kids never understood why. Nobody understood why. They thought he had gone off his rocker until Rich discovered what had happened. And it was actually a beautiful atonement for that event. So there's all these amazing things that go on, and it's like so programmed into our DNA, and we think we have so much free will. But what we have is, like the option of making choices on how we receive what's going on for us. But so much of it is incomplete business that we're here to complete for the future and for our ancestors. And profound healing happens when these things go on.
Well, getting into some interesting stuff there. I mean, I think our limited view of time, when we think of past lives, ancestors, future, past, I think it's more likely that we're seeing time in the wrong way. We're seeing time in some sort of linear thing. And I think it's all going on all at once somehow. And we've just got this real limited view of it, and everything is having a bearing on something else. So we think, people who see and convinced about this linear form of time, and they're saying, right, okay, this ancestor had this, and so this will have an effect on us. Don't be ridiculous. That's so unscientific. That's nonsense. But when they actually see that, time cannot be this linear thing, because there has to be some beginning, some end, if it's some linear thing. It doesn't work that way. Something's going on that we just don't understand anything about time at all. And so everything that is in our future, in our past, it's all working on us in ways that we can never really see completely. And we get these little glimpses into it of the magic that happens. And when you were saying that, about my mum, I had this, I don't see it as this string of time. I see this, when you were talking about that, what was going on in my head was this whole concertinaing of time, of my mother as she was when I was a child, my mother as she was when I wasn't at home and I didn't see her so much, and then when I had to look after her, and the sort of and how that was all going on all at once in one great big melting pot. It appears sometimes to be separated by 50 years, but is it really? No, we just see it like that. So that's why these things have such a beautiful effect, and that's why you can cross the generations, and you can cross. It's all we're just seeing things in limited dimensions here, and so that's beautiful. Yes, of course I can see that, and I see that in. It's funny. I wrote a book. I have another book that nobody really knows about. It's called An Illusion of Maya, and it's a novel. And I wrote it in 2003, and I wrote it about. Well, it was triggered by some past life memories that I had, if you can call them past life, or let's call them parallel, shall we?
Yes. Yeah.
with my wife, who was, I'd only been married once. I have a son also of 28, and it was the mother of that son, my son Tom, who's wonderful. And we had this sort of memories of past lives with her. There was some kind of Bedouin thing going on. And my father had real strong links to the Middle East and lived out there. I was actually conceived out there. And then I wrote this book, and a lot of it was set in India and stuff like that. But it's really interesting because a lot of that book, I really delved deep into it and just sort of thought, okay, I had this experience with this lady I was seeing at the time in India in 99, 2000. And we traveled in India. I was with this lady for about 5 years. She was bipolar, and she was marvelous. I mean, a great heart, as a lot of them do. They just kind of, again, very often sorted out by diet and a carnivore diet. But we didn't know that in those days. And so very unpredictable, very crazy. And I couldn't make sense of it. So I made sense of it in a novel. And I had a lot of our India travels, and I had the past lives, the Bedouin thing, and lots of other crazy stuff going on. Some of it's kind of X-rated. But, I wrote it in 2003, and then over the next 10 years, so much more of it came true. Some of the weird stuff in there was true, and some of it was total fantasy. Yeah. But a lot of it came true after that. It's funny. I haven't talked about that for years, and that's the second time I've talked about it today. You see what I mean? I mean, there's always these little synchronicities. That's the second time it's come up. This visitor, this friend of ours who's staying right now, just took the book away and read it. She was here about a week ago. She read that book, and came back. I thought she'd read the other one. There's a sort of arthritis one that I had, but no, she read that one. And I was explaining the same thing, that things came true, but they were vivid to me at the time in my mind. But time isn't working how we think it is. If we look at these clues and how things are working, it's like, I think I've got a talk up on YouTube somewhere, really tracing the autoimmunity starting back to mushroom trips. Loads of psilocybin trips in 1979-80, and how that kicked off instead of, and again, another synchronicity. This is very cool. Sometime today, a good friend of mine posted about how shamans, they don't see mental illness as mental illness. They see it as an awakening and that kind of birthing process into a different state of consciousness. And then, sometimes we take these things, we do a load of tripping or something and end up with what the docs call schizophrenia, when really, if you're totally relaxed and surrendered, it's actually an opening into an awakening. But I don't. And I had 30 years of resisting that because the docs told me, put fear into me that there was something wrong with me. I spent 30 years learning resistance that eventually manifested in a general resistance of my immune system to its own tissues. And you can see how the subtle comes through to the gross in every single way if you actually sit down and look at the patterns of your life and ignore all this science and stuff like that, which is kind of useful sometimes. But just to really say, well, what's happened? What's led up to this? How has the subtle come through to the gross here? And anybody in their own journey into ill health or back again can see these patterns. That's why I consider illness to be such a blessing, because it's just when the warning panel, the instrument panel on the car is flashing so much you can't ignore it. And then you have to put these things into practice, you have to look deeper than just diet. And that's when you start to discover the real magic. That's why I love people who've healed from diseases. I love them because they have a certain maturity about them. I mean, it's funny calling me mature, because I'm known for acting like a complete child and talking about toilet humor constantly. But I think that's a completely different thing. I think the maturity is just sort of being completely at peace with whatever's going on and whatever's happened in your past or in your parallel. If we're not talking about time as a linear thing. And this is where you can learn from healing. And that's why I called the book Arthritis the Best Thing That Ever Happened to Me, because it took me to places that I was too stupid or too lazy to look without that kind of pain. And all pain is growing pain. So, Christ, I rambled off on that one. You got me on a tack there that I didn't think we'd get into. That was excellent. I enjoyed talking about that and not just ribeye steaks.
Well, I wanted to quickly mention a piece that's been a wonderful kind of model for me. Dietrich Klinghardt came up with it, and it's like a pyramid. And the lower biggest part is the physiological one. And we could heal ourselves with doing things like the carnivore diet. That's a physiological way to deal with things. And then we can heal at another level. The second level up has to do with things like light and magnetism and frequency, right? And then the third level up has to do with our mental, emotional aspect of things. So, if you tell someone to look for everything in the room that's brown, and then have them close their eyes and say, okay, what was red? All they can see is brown, because that's where their focus went, right? So there's a profound way to support ourselves by, instead of thinking about how we're dying, how we're living, how we're growing, and all the rest of that. But at the pinnacle is the spiritual. And each part can cure the part beneath it. So the electric, magnetic, and that part can heal the physical. And then the mental, emotional piece and frequency piece, whatever, can heal the ones beneath that. But the spiritual piece can heal them all. And that's why I love Anita's story so much. And I've spent time in India and years. I mean, I've been meditating for over 55 years now, with different teachers from all over, many different traditions, and met incredible masters, and have quite a community of friends who've had near-death experiences, who've had profound healings on a spiritual level. So to me, that's that. I mean, if we can include that piece in our work, and it's interesting, it's almost like you have to beg people to put 5 or 10 minutes into it, yet it's the piece that heals everything.
I know. It's funny, isn't it? It's funny. I'm known as the real woo-wooist in this whole carnivore thing. It was funny, because that YouTube channel, I just started off, and then I started talking about carnivore as well. And that seems to be what I've got stuck on, and that's what gets all the hits. It's not really what I'm about at all.
Well, that's why I love you so much, Phil. That's beams through you.
Oh, sweet, thank you. Because that, I mean, all my life I've been interested in the whole business of consciousness and stuff. I've really not been particularly interested in ribeye steaks. And I seem to talk about more of that than I do with anything else. But, coming from that side of it into this, it's what I needed, to come down to that whole grounding side of things. And what I'd ignored was the whole emotional side. I mean, I looked at diet and decided the whole yogi diet of vegetarianism and veganism and stuff was very cool and nice and spiritual and all that. I was totally wrong on that. The spiritual side of stuff, yes, I was okay. I was getting somewhere there. But all of that emotional stuff in the middle, I had to go and look at. The stuff that I had to wade through. I found that when I got sick in 2010 and then stopped focusing totally on diet by 2012, 2013, and started to really, really delve into the emotional side, which I thought, that's just for housewives, who've got a headache and they've got something to... I'm a great yogi. I've been meditating for years, I can do the flying siddhi, for Christ's sake, all this nonsense. This spiritual egotism. And then you think, I don't need that. I don't need Byron Katie's questions. I don't need any EFT. That's for complete idiots. And then I realized, yes, this is exactly what I needed. And I needed to wade through all of this emotional. And I realized that, I might have been 48 years old when I got sick and 50, 51 by the time that I realized that diet was not the 100% cure to this. And then I had to actually face the fact that I was actually seriously retarded emotionally. And there were some areas where I was still 5 years old or 16 years old or 10 years old or just completely barking mad. And I had to look at loads of them. And some of the points of releasing them were, I think, far more powerful experiences than the moment that I got interviewed. Probably Rick wanted to interview me because about a point in 2006 where I just had that sort of very simple popping through of realizing that everything's one and that sense never went away. that basic awakening that people think is such a great big massive mystery and whatever, and put on a pedestal, and it isn't at all. It's probably our essential nature that spirituality and religion keeps us well away from, with a dangling carrot, but it's the experiences afterwards of mopping up the emotional crap, that was probably much more powerful even than that point that I'd wanted all of my life, of being able to have that awakening and not lose it.
Well, all the non-dual teachers seem to basically say just that. One of my favorite people is Adyashanti, and because he's so down to earth. So many people wake up around him, and I've done many of his retreats. It's just
I was talking to Rick today. I was just listening to a Bonnie Greenwell interview on Buddha at the Gas Pump, and I'm just about to put an email together to Adya. And I've never talked to him, I've never met him, but I know Rick knows him really well. And I just said to him, listen, I'm getting sick of hearing all about Adya's inflammatory problems. If he's where he is and he has all of that sorted and he's still got Bell's palsy, let's put something together. I said to Rick, listen, let's get rid of that inflammation. I've had enough of this nonsense, And Rick said, yeah, okay, I'll pass it on. So anyway, we'll see what happens over the next few days. We'll see if I can talk to Adya about carnivory, because that's the only thing I can offer him.
Yes, no, I hear you.
But yeah, I love him. He's ace, isn't he? He's one of the most down to earth. He's the funniest. When I find that, what I loved was his. I have his audio book. Which one is it? It's about stabilizing the whole process after an awakening.
Yeah.
And what's it? I've forgotten what it's called. It's a great book, and I've listened to it so many times. I mean, it just made so much sense. And I'd never found anything else which was saying, okay, now you've had that shift, how are you going to make sense of it? And that was very useful for me, because nobody's really written it from that perspective before, because in the Indian tradition, it's all built up, oh, you have that shift, that's it, you're a holy man and to be worshipped. And that's nonsense, because actually you become like a tiny little baby, and it has to stabilize over years.
So all your emotional stuff is so much stronger and right in your face.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, you have a new perspective to deal with it, but it's strong.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that's exactly what happened to me. I got sick after that. And I remember when I got sick and I thought, God, that happened to me 4 years ago. How can I get sick now? How can that happen to me? And it's just a great big slap that you've got to go through a whole load of other work too. But it's such a fascinating journey. It really is, looking back. And the people who just crash are the people who just resist it. You've got to. I always say to people that I really worry when people have a cancer diagnosis and they say, right, I'm going to fight this cancer.
Yes.
I think, oh dear. The ones who generally, setting aside all the knowing about all the stuff and the spiritual things and the ways that you can unwind it and go through all the work, the ones who actually have what the docs tend to call spontaneous remissions are the ones who, instead of saying, I'm going to fight it and then get it all wrong, it's like going that I'm going to actually pile through the chemo and we're going to get it. That's what they call fighting it. And, oh dear, that's going to be a problem. The ones who actually seem to get it sorted are the ones who go, do you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to buy a motorhome. I'm going to go traveling and I'm going to have fun for my last 6 months. Yeah. And six years later, what's happening? They're still doing it because they're fine, because it's disappeared. And that's what I love.
Yeah, to me, it's all about anything that you do needs to be about nourishing and loving yourself.
Yeah.
So the diet, if you decide that you're going to do, cannabis oil, or you decide that you're going to be doing, different herbs, or you get one of the Greek tests and get a list of things that naturally are recommended for that particular line of tumor. Anything that you do needs to be from a point of view of nurturing and loving yourself and supporting yourself, and then looking at, how do I live life more fully? Because, twice with illnesses, I, could have had a death sentence. And what it just did was throw me deeper into my appreciation of the moment and how precious it is to be alive right now. And in fact, I was cleaning out some of my bookshelves and stuff, and I came across Stephen Levine's work. I absolutely love him. And he worked with all these different people who had death sentences. And he helped them to just get into this incredibly mindful state and feel what they were feeling. And look at how each moment might be my last. How do I want to live it right now? How can I live more fully? And the interesting thing is, when I met my husband, that was our first discussion. We were working with Atisha's, I forget the term that they use, but contemplations, her contemplations on death. And, you know, the first one is, every moment is a moment closer to my death. And just to really contemplate that, you know. So what does that mean to me now? And that whole focus on being present here now with what's really here, and then just learning about how our mind can take the past and create so much misery, or fear of the future and create so much misery. But if we're really here now, I mean, I'm here right now. I'm breathing right now. I'm having a wonderful conversation right now. You know, I mean, how do I live in this moment, and how do I fulfill my greatest desires, like going off in the mobile home, or maybe you've always wanted to, you know, go to the Bahamas or whatever it is. You know, how do I do that? Phil, this is so funny because we had a little discussion before we started all this about, well, how do we work with the carnivore diet in relationship to specific things? We've gone so far into my favorite area.
You know, that's after what we've discussed here, it's really easy to answer that, actually, because to me, how do you work with the carnivore diet with specific things? You don't. What you do is you just use it as part of getting to our ancestral heritage in every single way, on every single level, with light, with magnetism, with feeling the seasons, with getting your feet on the ground, with eating the diet that we've already always ancestrally eaten, according to our season and latitude, you know, and getting our emotions in balance. And then realizing that we're all just one anyway, and time's probably just this beautiful, great big soup rather than a long string firing off into infinity. So, you know, once you've done all that, then I'm getting less and less focused on individual diagnoses. All I see of individual diagnoses is how long probably it's going to take to heal somebody, and how many levels you're going to have to look at. You know, if somebody comes along with diabetes, it's like, hey, this is going to be pretty easy.
Yeah.
You can kind of laugh at that, cut the carbs, and it's going to sort itself out. And then 3 weeks later, they'll phone up like this miracle's happened. I go, no, man, it's really simple. You know, I heard something about the NHS in England, the National Health Service, spending $1 trillion, or maybe not $1 trillion, $1 billion or something, I don't know, some ridiculous figure, on diabetes meds. When how much could they save by just going, stop eating the carbs, and it will go away? You know, but they haven't twigged onto that. You know, the sites have got, and keep up this complex carbohydrate, and do that and do that. But you see their Facebook group, you know, the British Diabetic Association, or was it the Australian one? Anyway, whichever one, they're all the same. And every comment is, how on earth are you still pumping out this bullshit? You know, every comment, and they carry on posting and carry on posting. So then you do this, and then you do it, and everyone's going, are you the last to realize here? And they're not even listening. It's so bizarre looking at those Facebook groups. I couldn't believe it. You'd think that at some point they go, hang on a minute. So you don't know what the hell's going on. So anyway, so if someone comes with diabetes, that's pretty easy. And then autoimmunity, it's a bit more difficult, and cancer, a bit more difficult, and all that, like we said before. But to me, it's just like what the diagnosis is. I asked the diagnosis because it's almost like the diagnosis often gives a very good idea, not only of how long it's going to take them to heal, but what sort of a personality they are. Like I find people with multiple sclerosis actually incredibly resistant to healing. I find people with arthritis pretty compliant to it because it's actually screaming agony. But multiple sclerosis isn't such screaming agony in the same way as arthritis is. So there isn't quite so much motivation, you know, frightening, and it's a horrendous diagnosis, and I'm not meaning to belittle it, but it doesn't have the immediate screaming agony of not being able to walk to the toilet because your ankles are so inflamed you can't walk there to pee, you know. So it's a different thing, and it seems to come with a character that really is resistant to it. They just will not do anything, you know. And some will, some won't, but you know, but you see these sort of little subtleties about different illnesses and different imbalances. So to me, yeah, diagnosis is not particularly important. I just think all I can see is, and all I'm ever going to be anything of an expert in, is spotting the ways in which we confuse our body on all the different levels. And so once you unconfuse the body, then, you know, the last 10%, then maybe that's where all these subtle balances come in. Cannabis oil, naturopathy, homeopathy. These are the beautiful polishing agents. But I often say, like, hose all the mud off the car before you polish it. You know, subtract first and then add the little things later. So I think that kind of answers that with the individual things. I don't really think about individual things anymore. And I like to get people to think, to go away from, I have this diagnosis, you know?
Well, it sounds like, you know, what we're talking about right now is if we support the body will heal us.
Yeah.
And so if we take away the stuff that's harming the body and making it hard for it to do its job, you know, then we're actually in alignment with the body and we're working with it instead of against it. And our whole paradigm of having to fix the body is kind of backwards.
Yeah. It's incredibly arrogant, actually. It's so weird when you get people put up on pedestals for being these doctors, when really you look at them and you know, they don't understand how the liver works particularly, let alone the brain. And they're only discovering stuff like deuterium now, which is probably, you know, like Laszlo Boris I was hearing mentioned the other day, is probably mentioned in the Torah and the Bible, and it's probably the Amma of Ayurveda. You know, it's probably been known about. They just haven't actually put the words an extra isotope of hydrogen on it. So they've understood this probably forever, that there is something that clogs up the very basic physical function of the mitochondria. And they've known that, you know, just from cognition, just from their consciousness, they can tell that at a very subtle level something's clogging up. And now we've gone through this convoluted scientific process to come around to it. And now everything's tying in again, you know, like you get the SAN conference, the science and non-duality and whatever. And it's all coming together. They're realizing, the brightest in both fields are realizing it's the same bloody field. It's the same field that they're studying, you know, and the subtler they get, the fewer differences there are. And like you say, yeah, the spiritual heals everything. So that's going to the subtlest level. And nothing's going to work until that's fixed. And you don't really get into that until the emotion. Well, I did it the other way around. I've kind of lived my life backwards. You know, I sort of retired at 16 and then decided to go into all this spiritual stuff. And now at 56 years old, I'm thinking, I'm where I was at 18. Like, what am I going to do when I grow up? You know, and I need to find a way to feed my family, because the inheritance that I had, which was very nice from my dad and all that, that's run out. So now I'm thinking, I've actually got to fix things, you know. And every now and again, I'm thinking, can we afford steak today? You know? But it's such an interesting process. So that's what I'm dealing with now. And that's why the only physical symptom I have now is my knee. You know, it doesn't really hurt, but it's kind of still looks a bit different. And it's still, so, you know, some of the tissues haven't gone quite back like all the other joints have. Because to me, it's the only issue I have is money and moving forward in life. And where's this going? What exactly am I doing? I don't know exactly what I'm doing. It seems to be taking shape now. And I seem to, you know, I get all these lovely people wanting to interview me. And I get people coming to me for Skype consults and stuff. But I still quite haven't settled into that role, because I don't believe that I'm such an expert as people think I am. Do you know what I mean? Because the more you learn, the more you think you're an idiot.
Phil,
and that you don't know anything.
Keep talking for a second. I'm going to grab my Recall Healing book and let's take a peek at me.
Yeah, cool.
Okay. By the way, this book is a little hard to get your hands on, but I have like 20 copies of it, and I can get more. It's called The Pyramid Healing, Recall Healing, The Pyramid of Health. And let me look up knee real quick.
Yeah, there's one interesting one that I used to work from. Well, as well, there's the Louise Hay stuff, but there's also, there's also, Inner Seagull, the secret language of your body, which kind of does that, going through.
Jacques Martel's books. Are you familiar with Jacques Martel?
No, I'm not. No.
Well, he's written a book very similar to this too. We use them both when we're working with people. But okay, knee. Here's hands, guilt. It's interesting too about the MS piece that you were saying, because so many doctors over the years have said, I did a lot of bioenergetic type courses with doctors from all over the world about working with healing, with more energetic medicines. And they always said that people with MS needed their MS in order to get the help that they wanted and to be taken care of. There are people that felt like they weren't nurtured and weren't taken care of. I could look up MS too, but the knee is more focused for you. So typically what we do is we would put an M wave on someone's ear when we do this. And 0.01 hertz is the frequency that we find when a person's energy is more in their heart than in their head. And so we're always looking for when their heart is in resonance with something. So typically we would have someone put that on their ear, but I think you can get in touch with that yourself. And here are what it says about the knees. The knees are linked to mobility and stability. Where joints are concerned, bones have two symbolic complementary meanings. The first corresponds to the static aspect, which prevents movement and provides rigidity. The second allows movement and assures mobility. These two complementary aspects are present at the knee. The conflict in relationship to both knees, or only one, the conflict of forced obedience. It's kind of that idea of being at a Catholic church on your knees, or someone brings you to your knees, where you have to be obedient. Examples: I have to work for my mother and I don't want to.
There we go.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
The second one is to obey without saying anything. So you're obeying, but you don't want to. The third is to be obliged to do something. The fourth is to be obliged to kneel down. Then there's a conflict of depreciation that's related to something physical or to sports. And the fourth is a conflict related to spirituality in certain religions. And the fifth is a conflict linked to walking and standing. An example is not being able to remain standing or walking for a long time because the knees are weak. So that would prevent you from having to do different tasks that you might not want to do. But you hit it with the mother, right?
Yeah. That should be dissipating now. Though to me, when I look at, I can see it in myself now. And when people come to me with this emotional stuff, I don't know if you'd agree with this, but what I find more than anything is when I first started looking into all this emotional kind of stuff, I used to think, okay, right, let's look back to childhood, let's dig into this, let's dig into that. And then I realized most of the time, your main symptom is probably linked to your main problem. Whatever's really worrying or bothering you in your head, and it might not be completely the most obvious thing, but if you sit with it for a while and find out what is actually the deepest thing that you're having a problem with right now, more often than not, it's linked to the problem, in the body. And with me, it's very obvious. It's quite easy to study this with arthritis because it can go anywhere. I've had it everywhere: jaw, fingers, wrist, spine, neck, sacroiliacs, ankles, toes, everywhere. And the different places it comes up can show you different things. Like that thing with my mum when it healed up, when the ankles healed up immediately, when it was a great relief of not having to be under her disapproval 24/7. I could walk out the front door when it appeared. And with the knee, it's very interesting because it's, to me now, there is only one. I only have one problem, like making sure that the family's okay. And that's something I never really had to do all my life because I've been a real small boy, or I've been a musician, or I've not cared about money, or I've inherited a bunch, so I haven't had to think about it for a few years. All those sort of things. Nature seems to have taken care of me tremendously. And it is actually doing now. But because now I don't know where it's coming from, but it always seems to turn up exactly when I need it, which is very interesting. So I started having more and more trust. And as I have more and more trust about that, this again goes through more levels of healing. And it's got to the point where it doesn't hurt anyway. There's no inflammation in there. But the other joints have all completely returned to normal. All the tissues that were swollen, the this and that, the damage that was done is all reversed. But the knee, there's just little bits left, And so now it's like, as the problem goes down, as I look at it in different ways, or as things come up where I start to think, hang on a minute, this is actually working now, and to stop having guilt about, because I started to have guilt about being paid. If I had a Skype consultation, people were paying me. And one guy last week, he said it was so useful, he paid me twice. He paid the consultation twice. I was like, oh, isn't that sweet? And I thought, no, I know now. I've got so many messages of people reversing this and that, and taking control of their own health. It's nothing to do with me. It's not making them depend on me. That I'm starting to have confidence. But I did have a lot of guilt about, oh, I'm charging for this. And I thought, well, actually, I've done it so much, like hours a day, helping people out for 5 years or so.
Right.
For free.
Yes.
And I think, well, why the hell not? And it's a matter of having the confidence myself to say, yeah, it's okay now. Yes, I do actually know this. I have had the blessings in life to not have to go and do a regular job and be able to study this much and be motivated by an illness to study this much. That, yes, I do know a hell of a lot. And so it's my duty to pass it on to people, and why not? And I love meeting people. I love chatting to them. And some of the people I Skype, who come to me for help, become friends anyway. It's great. They're brilliant people. They're always very interesting people who are open enough to come to me and not queue up down at the rheumatologist anyway.
Right.
So we have a great time. And so there was even that sort of guilt about, oh, I shouldn't really earn money for this. And then just when you're getting it, then you get 15 vegans attacking you for being on Twitter for being a snake oil salesman and taking advantage of desperate people and killing people with my meat-based advice. And you're like, have you seen my emails lately, mate? Have you seen all these people that have reversed stuff, But you can't argue. I went on Twitter the other day. I used to be very patient with them. And I've gone on the other day. I even made a vegan attack video, a carnivore response one to their. I'm not a vegan attacking video, but a response to the vegan attack. Right. And I did that on a couple of days ago. I just put up. Do you know what? I've had enough. If I get a whiff of you getting blocked, I've done my best. I've been so polite, and every time it ends up in abuse and whatever. And so I thought, eventually just got it. One evening, I had like 15 of them. And it was like a scene from The Walking Dead where you got 15 around you, and they're coming at you. You got one screwdriver or something. And it was like that one night on Twitter. And eventually I thought, I've had enough. Where's the science? Where's the studies? Meat gives you cancer. You're banging off this and that and this and that, making witty answers, or they just get more and more aggressive. And so I just stopped. And I went in and sat down on the sofa, and my partner, Detta, she said, what's the matter? Because I was just sitting there with my head in my hands. And I said, I am exhausted with this. And I thought, enough of that negativity. I do it because when you talk to those vegans, the crazy militant ones, quite often you've got other ones watching who are very chilled. And they've got something that needs addressing, and they actually pick up on this conversation. I get people coming to me who are the silent lurkers. That's basically why I do it. I don't really do it because I know I'm never going to convince a militant one 2 weeks in who thinks they're going to be healthy for life on it. I'm never going to do that. but I've thought, I've got to take care of myself. Like you said, the root of stuff is just loving yourself. If you're not in a good state, you're not going to help anybody else. And I realized when I had to sit with my head in my hands that day, I thought, enough. As soon as I get a whiff of you, I'm just blocking you. And so now it's interesting getting a confidence of actually doing that. And even putting that course out. And I thought, can I really put this course out? I thought I'll do 8 videos. I go fishing overnight on Sundays. And I thought I'll do an 8-video course. It'd be about 8 videos, help people out with some autoimmunity. I'll do that. I make most of my videos out at the lake, And I got so into it. It ended up 30 videos. I thought there's so many layers to this, to healing. And I ended up making 30 videos with action plans and links to further research. And I thought, okay, let's get some testimonials. And I sent it out to people who I knew. I sent it out to Jack Cruz, and I thought Jack's in a bit of a grumpy mood at the moment. He doesn't take any crap at the moment. He's having a go at anyone on the internet, online who's going on about food, going, nothing to do with that. It's about light. And he's very strict these days. And I thought, I'm a bit worried about sending it to Jack. And I could see from the course that he'd watched 100% of the videos, sent me some lovely messages, and then in the end wrote this beautiful testimonial. And I was like, wow, okay, maybe I have got something to say, because I respect Jack so much. Yeah. And it's funny, isn't it? Because you don't go through those channels, but then you forget that, the shaman in the village was just somebody who was fascinated by this stuff and followed their heart to the knowledge. And this is all I've done anyway. But of course, it makes you a quack because you haven't been to medical school. But you look at all the amazing docs, and the best stuff they've learned has been outside of medical school.
They all say that it was just to get a license, and then everything begins. The real education begins when they start really diving into the real research. Because when you're in school, they're being indoctrinated by the pharmaceutical company's point of view. And once they leave, if they're open-minded, my husband was a medic, then he went to pharmacy school, then he went to medical school, then he became an anesthesiologist, a board-certified anesthesiologist, and he left it all for alternative medicine. And that's when his education began. And, diving in really, really deep for 10 years. And where is he now? He knows all the meds, he knows all the scientific stuff, he can explain the working of the body on a level that very few people could ever begin to do, because he has the physiology and the biochemistry, but he also has the deeper spiritual understanding and the real research, like Jack has done real research. But he's also got this very sweet way and playful way of explaining things, which is a lot easier to be around sometimes. But anyway, Phil, I just wanted to share with you that this issue of the naysayers and all that on the website. One of my friends, who is an incredible teacher and does a lot of his work through websites, says that all he does when he gets these negative responses is he just writes down thank you, and then he tunes in and he just says, may you be blessed. And he is looking at the soul and the spirit of that person rather than the reactive, crazy part that's screaming at him at the moment. And he doesn't respond. He doesn't, get into any lengthy kinds of, trying to point out his point of view or anything else. He just says thank you. And he uses it as an opportunity for an internal spiritual practice of, just recognizing that the darkest part of each one of us needs to be loved like a child. And
absolutely.
And these beings do too. And believe me, I'm not capable of doing that all the time. You just need to have that as a model.
Over the years, it hasn't. It's stopped becoming anything that bothers me personally. It's just the actual exhaustion of answering so much on social media and staring into blue light.
Yeah.
I'm like that's the thing for me. I don't need to do that to my body anymore.
No.
Not for that. Not if I'm not helping anybody. So
Yeah.
I don't mind doing this. I got the blue screen and I got the candles, but kind of holding my phone and popping aggressive vegans every 2 seconds. It's like, whoa, you know.
No, I hear you.
But it's kind of hilarious. I generally play with them anyway and do some sort of funny answers because I can't, you know, I know where they are.
Yeah.
I've been there. I've been that brainwashed. I was never that aggressive. I never attacked anybody, but I believed what they believed. You know,
I did too. I did too. For years, I didn't even know people that weren't vegetarians.
Yes, me too. Yeah, well, living in this community up here,
Yeah.
most people were, and now they're very, very sick, most of them. So
It's true. It's true.
yeah. High deuterium diet, whether it's got meat in it or not.
Yes, I hear you.
Yeah.
Well, Phil, this has just been absolutely amazing. And I was hoping that you mentioned a little bit about your new program. Would you like to share a little bit more about it? Because I'm very excited about it. I want to get it myself. And, you know, I'll encourage people to do that as well. And, but I wanted to see if there's anything that you wanted to share with us about who you think it's for and what its benefits are. Besides, you're pouring your heart and soul into it.
Yeah. Well, I did. Well, it kind of flowed out. Really, it was very easy. I think I only made notes for about 2 of the videos, but it was just what I wanted to do was to take people through all the sides of healing. You know, not just diet or anything like that, but even the attitudes to it, like the acceptance of it, the looking for people who will encourage you on a path, the communities of people going through the same thing, how to look for all of this, everything from diet and why that works to deuterium depletion, why that's going on, and why that's relevant to everybody, water, understanding water and hydration of the body, the cold thermogenesis, light. I can't remember them all. Like there's 30 kind of subjects, and into the whole emotional balancing stuff, spiritual stuff, everything, and just how to make illness a real blessing. How to make it I want to have somebody to have a diagnosis and come to this course and go, actually, this is a real gateway. This is going to be an exciting journey. You know, instead of thinking, I've got this disease I need to get rid of, I need to fight it. So I want to give them that kind of attitude, and then show them exactly what they can do, and then explain why it's all tied into losing our ancestral identity of whether it's what we eat or whether the fact that we're all one, you know, and everything in between. And I think I've done that, and I think I also have given people rabbit holes to look at the real masters in all these various little sub areas, because I'm just a jack of all trades. You know, I understand enough of all of these things to get by because they all fascinate me. And I'm not one of these people who got well just by changing diets. I had to look at everything. So I give you a little rabbit hole openings into all of these other different people who are masters in these areas. You know, Jack on light and Laszlo Boris on deuterium and hundreds of others. So I think it'll be a good basis of starting the research for people and give them just a wonderfully exciting view of their illness, you know, and where it's going to take them. And so, yeah, we've got that. It's up on Thinkific. If you go to my website, which is, well, actually, I don't know if it's actually on the website yet, but if you look at my YouTube channel, you'll find a video where I'm going on about it, and there'll be a link there. Right now it isn't, but it will be on the website. It'll be up there at some point on pureactivityoneWord.net, or philescott.com gets to it as well. But, you know, we did chat about all those things, and it'll always be up there on my Facebook or whatever. I'm easy to find on that, or 100% Carnivore and Beyond, the Facebook group, which is quite funny. Not for snowflakes, you know. We're pretty irreverent on there and talk about a load of nonsense. And so that's a lot.
You have the Beyond the Beyond. And you
mentioned
the
Beyond one, yeah. If somebody's, you know, into the sort of second half of our conversation here, then they might like that group too, because I tell you, it's been really lovely to talk to you, Grace, because it generally, you know, I don't get to go as deep as that, and we've had a really lovely chat. It was really enjoyable. I forgot we were even having an interview. We were just hanging out, you know, and it was that was really lovely to be able to get into some of that stuff, because I don't so often. That would be cool.
Gate. Well, Well, you brought up one thing that I just flashed. Oh, I really want to know this. So excuse me for popping back into this part. But talk to me about deuterium and meat. Because, I'm always hearing deuterium depleted water, and I worked a lot with something called Divinia water, which Jack questioned, but my friend who developed it is this amazing scientist who was actually on Pollock's team, and one of Pollock's mentors as well as a teammate.
Oh.
Point. So, and his water is deuterium depleted, but it's EZ water as well. So I've just looked at deuterium from the water point of view, but tell me how being a carnivore supports deuterium depletion.
Well, the highest deuterium foods are, just quickly, if somebody doesn't know about deuterium, it's an extra isotope on hydrogen, which if there's too much of that in the water, it creates heavy water. And if we're hydrating ourselves with that all the time, it clogs up the cells. So the mitochondria, the engines in the mitochondria that create ATP blow up. And this creates all sort of aging, autoimmunity, obviously cancer when the cells go crazy. So that's the theory of deuterium. So you want to be depleting deuterium in the body. And to research that, have a look at a guy called Laszlo Boros. There's a talk on YouTube of 2018 Vermont, but also his interview on the Lifestylist podcast, Luke Story's Lifestylist podcast. It's a 3-hour one with him and Q Collins. And if you listen to that, it'll blow your mind. Every 5 minutes, you'll be just switching it off going, I'm going to have to digest that. That's making so much sense. And they're funny. And I'm a drummer, and Laszlo's a drummer too. So that's cool. So he's perfectly sane in that respect. But yeah, so anyway, that's deuterium. And the deuterium is okay in nature, it promotes growth. It's in fruit and whatever. And it's low in like leafy green plants. But then in those leafy green plants, there are also other problems like the oxalates, salicylates, fiber, which has been said to be wonderful, but actually probably causes all the problems it's said to cure. So, we have that in the plant kingdom, but basically the plant kingdom is generally, as far as what we'd find in a supermarket for the plant kingdom, is pretty high in it. So this will stuff the body full of deuterium. Now, I think one of the best ways to illustrate it is like Laszlo does with a camel, because camels hydrate themselves from their humps, as they, they need to eat a bit more cactus or whatever they eat. They don't drink water, I don't think. But they, the humps fill up again. It's not filling up with water. People think they fill up with water. They're full of saturated fat. And they're hydrating themselves via saturated fat. So saturated fat, as we eat it, causes the cells to create their own deuterium-depleted water. So I would say that unless somebody's got pancreatic cancer or something, I wouldn't really bother with deuterium-depleted water, because actually, like Laszlo says, if you eat enough saturated fat, you start to drink a lot less. Like Laszlo says, he has a cup of coffee in the morning with some deuterium-depleted water. He doesn't drink for the rest of the day. And Laszlo recovered from cancer that killed his twin brother, and they were both doctors. And his brother died, and he was already a researcher into deuterium. His brother had cancer and went for chemo, and he died. But Laszlo's still here, 12 years later or whatever, and he's fine. And he did it just with deuterium depletion. He didn't do any of the chemo or anything. And so now he doesn't drink. He's very hot on this whole business of how we've always drunk too much. We've always drunk, we've always been told drink, 5 liters of water a day, or whatever funny arbitrary figure people put on it, like they put on the 5 a day vegetable nonsense, so we've been drinking too much, and we're actually dehydrating ourselves by drinking too much. And what we really need to do is to make sure the cells are creating their own deuterium-depleted water by eating a very high-fat and saturated fat animal fat diet. And this causes the cells to create their own water, and you don't need to take so much of the other crappy water that you might find around the place in. But if you're doing that and eating hardly any carbs and plants and fruits and whatever that are high in deuterium, then it allows the body's always set up to deplete deuterium. If you fast, it's depleting deuterium. That's probably what is so good about fasting. But to actually be able to eat and still eat, low deuterium, it's like, he said we want to be eating, 120 parts per million and below in our food, because if you sort of get to 140 generally, somewhere around that, 140 parts per million deuterium in the body, that's when they see, that and up, they see diseases starting, and you deplete the deuterium, and it can, it tends to keep you pretty safe. So cells are pretty safe and working pretty well. So if you're eating below that, I think this may be one of the reasons why people say some people react to egg whites and not egg yolks. Okay, there's more proteins in the yolks, and people will react to, in the whites, and so people will react to the whites. But a lot of people are fine with the yolks. I only eat egg yolks. But I found out the other day, another one of the little light bulbs that went off, like egg whites are 140 parts per million, egg yolks are 120. And you're like, oh, hello, there's another reason why egg yolks are good. When you look through at everything to do with health through this lens of deuterium, and to me, it's something else might be just moving through. But this has come up, and it tends to tie in with nature. It ties in with the great results the doctors are getting with cancer cures, with deuterium depletion. And everything that worked in my healing tends to be in that area of deuterium depletion. And it's wonderful. So that's how it works with the meat, People say, oh, meat causes cancer, but all the studies were done on plant-based people. If you think about it, they're eating cereal for breakfast, they'll eat McDonald's for lunch, and they'll have a pizza with some pepperoni on the top in the evening, and then they go, meat causes cancer. Hello? How can you possibly isolate the meat from that? So it's nothing to do with that. Like my friend Amy Usten, she says that it's funny how all the problems associated with meat and saturated fat completely disappear when all you eat is meat and saturated fat. Yeah. And so it's obviously been mixed in with something else. And then when you look at it from deuterium depletion, look at it from the paleomedicina viewpoint, where they're showing from gut permeability tests that the gut never totally heals up while there's any plants left in the diet. And they can show that, and having tremendous results with chronic diseases. And so are the guys who are sorting out the deuterium, who are coming to pretty much the same conclusions about diet. They're just adding deuterium depleted water. And it all seemed, all these beautiful bits of research that are really working seem to be coming together. And so, and the more and more they're looking at it, even the people, I heard some stem cell researcher going on about something lately where they say, if somebody's on a ketogenic diet, really low carb, or as we know it now, also low deuterium diet, the stem cell therapies are working a hell of a lot better. They always want people to go in with in ketosis or whatever. So it gives them, all these things can kind of work hand in hand. So that's why this, the meat, the animal products, basically very, very low in deuterium. And if you want something else to go with that, that's green leaves. And to most people, that's fine. But then again, to me, I just don't think they're necessary. I don't like them, so why bother? They were just a sponge for butter. So there's no need to eat them, but they are low in deuterium, but they have other problems. Right. So, high fat meat diet, very low in deuterium, hydrates the cells and allows the redox potential and all the autophagy, apoptosis, allows the cells to regenerate themselves so that they don't, they can turn over those cancer cells and get rid of them quickly. Like you said earlier, we've all had it many times. We've all got cancer cells in our body, but the body's equipped to deal with it, Just don't put the fear in it that stops it being able to.
So what I got from that, and the part that was really important for me, is I really have realized for a long time that it's not so much about drinking deuterium water as it is to do what's necessary to encourage our mitochondria to produce the deuterium depleted water, or the easy water. And I don't know if it's both or one. Jack might say it's more the deuterium depleted water. Others might say it's more the easy. But it looks as if this beautiful metaphor of the camels and their saturated fat that's producing their deuterium depleted water is something that appears to be true for us as well.
And they don't age. Did you know that? I mean, this is something I heard as well on that great Laszlo Boris interview, that they don't seem to age. Like, you can't tell if a camel's like 7 or 31 or something. They just kind of drop dead.
Easy.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really checked this out, but he said that. I'm sure he wouldn't say it if he was going to get pulled up on it. But, I can't, I'm thinking about it, and I can't remember seeing really old, decrepit grey camels. There's just a line of camels that look pretty much the same, Right. And then they tend to just kind of drop dead, and you're not quite sure how old they are unless you've had the camel from being a young camel. Right. So obviously they're hydrating themselves through saturated fat constantly and doing that wonderful process and not drinking so much. When we've been told that drinking loads is so healthy,
I know.
that's crazy. So I mean, you've got to look at the environment, though. You know, I mean, I think a lot of this blue zone business was they were in a very low deuterium environment. They probably had fantastic water. They were doing everything seasonally, and then some idiot goes in from the west, does some really biased research, and says it's because they were vegetarian. It's absolutely nonsense. They weren't vegetarian anyway, and it was a low deuterium environment. You know, it's like, wow, just 1 + 1 = 500 there. This ridiculous research that we're still listening to. So, you know, and they misappropriated the diets anyway. We won't get into the whole myth of the blue zones and all of that China study nonsense as well. But you know, I think you got to look at the whole environment, really. This is where Jack's right. You know, you got to look at the whole environment, and it's not just diet. It's fine to get your diet together. It's fine to talk about carnivory and all this stuff, as long as you realize it's not the be all and end all of everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's, you know, as we're talking deuterium now, you know, we can put on a different lens, and you know, and if we look through the deuterium lens, then we can look at that piece really intensely. If we put on the light lens, we could look through that, you know, the EMF lens. And I was thinking about, like, when I was doing metabolic typing, we used to say, well, how are you going to be able to tell what's really going on for someone doing these studies on different medications or supplements, unless you know whether you have a fast oxidizer, a slow oxidizer, a parasympathetic dominant, a sympathetic dominant, all that kind of stuff. Because they respond totally differently. I mean, just the opposite to different substances was at least the window that I was looking through for many, many years. So, you know, it just depends on our window. And I think my primary window now is just looking at how Mother Nature provided things for us, how we change things, how we actually come back to the way it was. You know, I spent 2 years backpacking through the woods, and we just came out to get supplies and go back in. And I had been seriously ill as a child. And when I came out, I was healthier than I'd ever been, because I was in the light all the time. I was on the earth all the time. We were fishing out of the creeks, and we took a deer, and we were eating part of it while we made jerky out of the rest, you know, and we ate squirrel. And one day we tried to eat a porcupine. That was a disaster. But anyway, it was just, you know, an amazing thing to recognize that. And then Jack comes up with all of this information. I was going, my God, you know, here it is all integrating again. And I'd always thought the sun was important, but I didn't realize the importance of the morning sun and the full frequency of light. And it brought these pieces back that started to make these huge, huge differences for me. But nothing seems to have actually completed the healing process like this carnivore diet. And the more I study about the botany of plants, the more amazing it is. And I haven't taken my herbal teas out yet. That's the one place that I'm still getting plant matter is, you know, through my herbal teas. So I guess I'm going to knock them out. I have so many trainings. I mean, I've been doing this for 50 years, and I doubt if there's a day that goes by when I don't get at least an hour or two of studying something really in depth for all these years.
Me too. I mean, when I'm out, nobody can get hold of me because my phone's on airplane mode, and I've always got some interesting podcast in my ears. You know, I find it funny if I'll sort of watch the TV and watch a bit of a program, and then I walk in to cook. I'm going, right, what was I studying earlier on? Let's get it back in the earphones while I'm cooking, or just anything, any time when I'm driving or fishing or shopping. This is all study time. You know, I can't understand people that don't have this inquisitive nature. You know, it's awful to come back to it, but the vegans, they'll watch 2 or 3 propaganda films, and they're experts. They don't realize how much people like you and I have studied, like 10 hours a day for decades, and still got it wrong for most of the time.
No, I mean, it's like wow, when you actually stumble on something that's really working, it's amazing, just amazing.
Yeah,
And you just
yeah.
go, oh my God, I guess it's all been worth it.
And this is what they don't. This is what they don't understand. When you try and put it across to somebody, you say, "Eating just meat and fat and dropping lots of plants out," you will not believe it. Stop arguing with it unless you've tried it for 30 days, and then come back and argue. And no one ever does after that. It changed their whole view. Whether they go back and put a few plants in, whatever, they'll never think about diet the same again. And I just say go and try that, because honestly, I've tried every single other diet. Yes, but it goes against the science. Yes, but the World Health Organization says this. Yes, but of course, all the gurus say that you can't get enlightened if you eat any meat. And you're like, oh, for Christ's sake, will you just go and try it? Will you just go and try it for 30 days if you've got something wrong with it? Otherwise, just don't stop passing opinions on it, because I know it sounds insane. But I've never seen healing like it. I've never seen healing like it. I work with people with the paleo stuff, with the keto stuff, with macrobiotic, with everything. Vegan. And yet you put somebody on a 100% meat diet, utter miracles happen. And I can hardly believe it myself. And it sounds evangelical. People say, oh, well, of course, you used to be vegan and now you're carnivore. You've gone from one extreme to the other. No, I haven't. I've tried every single diet with an open mind. And this one is just unbelievable what it does to people.
Yeah.
And they go, so should everyone eat like this? No, eat what you like. And what I ate that made me that sick was the best thing that happened to me ever. So go eat your pizza right now, get sick, and then you're going to go on a great journey.
So Phil, I'm curious, who of these people that you've studied do you think have been the most influential on the carnivore level? And is there somebody who really has specialized or gone really deeply into cancer and carnivore?
I don't think anybody's gone specific. It depends what you mean by this carnivore movement, because that's only kind of recent. People say it's in bad and whatever. No, it's our ancestral history, and whole civilizations have done it. But it's only recently that it's got really, and people started shouting about it, and there's Sean Baker and whatever. But all these people seem to be focusing pretty much just on the diet. So the people who I would say are the most interesting to look at are the people outside the diet field, because they will then explain why the diet is so good for cancer anyway. I would listen to people like Laszlo Boros, like Jack Cruz, maybe Natasha Campbell McBride, and the guys at Paleo Medicina, who probably with the cancer thing, they've got a lot of stuff going on at Paleo Medicina and case studies, and they're actually documenting it and whatever. So if you can look at those people who are not just saying, "Oh, just eat ribeye steak all day long and your cancer will go away," it's not that simple. It's not. I'm not saying to anybody, maybe if you got IBS, you got diabetes, you're a bit overweight, something like that, you got a bit of depression. Yes, the carnivore diet's going to hit it straight away, but there are things that are a little bit more complicated than that. You're going to have to look at all the other stuff. It's not the thing we think. It's, again, all the other environmental things. So I would say looking at somebody like Laszlo Boros and really what depletes deuterium, looking at people, like Jack Cruz, who are on about the light and will really explain that and what happens in different seasons and why things have happened in different latitudes, how you can eat differently at different latitudes. I think that will give you far more of an idea about carnivory than actually listening to most of the carnivore gurus right now. Although they're doing great work, but to really understand the plan, and if you've got some kind of cancer going on, look at the guys like Laszlo Boros, Q Collins, Sophia Clements, and Chava Top at Paleo Medicina, I'd say.
Sophia Clements.
Yeah, she's fantastic.
Yeah. Is there anyone that you know of that's really focused on neurological diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, that sort of thing?
Well, I think Alzheimer's is showing a lot of promise with this, because it's just basically, I think people are thinking of it now as type 3 diabetes, aren't they?
That's one of the three different types.
Yeah. So I think the difficult ones, well, Parkinson's seems to have some good anecdotes anyway about it on the carnivore diet and keto diets, but I think the difficult ones are things like ALS, Lou Gehrig's.
Yes.
You know, I have the misfortune, or rather my friend has the misfortune of my best friend from school, and he's just been diagnosed with ALS.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, we can have a look at this, and actually it looks more bleak than I thought. There are actually some, I think if he got everything right, I think the body can do anything. You know, I do. But seems to be the most difficult one. Like, I talked to Sophia and I said, what have you got for my friend? What have you seen with Lou Gehrig's disease, with ALS? She said it's the one thing we're not having results with on this Paleolithic ketogenic diet, which was kind of interesting. So things in that area can, I think, be very, very difficult once they've got a head of steam. But I don't know. You see, I mean, they're just working with diet. So I talked to my great friend, Dr. Jeremy Ayres, who is, I think he's wonderful. And he said, no, there is stuff that I can look at for this. And he said exactly the same as you. You know, had a lot of the naturopathic training, whatever. And he said exactly the same as you. The last piece of the puzzle for him was this carnivore thing. Mm-hmm. You know, and he felt that there was something missing, and he had all that huge knowledge, and he's been doing fantastic work with people for years. But that just kind of put the real plug in it. And but he says with all the other stuff that he's doing, he reckons he might have a handle on something that for Lou Gehrig's. But we'll see. I don't know. You know, that story will have to unfold. I don't have experience with that. But yes, definitely some of the neurological stuff, you know, yeah. I mean, you know, it's just, again, part of the body. And if it's inflammation based, you know, anything that's inflammation based, it's, yeah, absolutely, that's going to work.
So I could put this out to you that you might want to look into Andrew Heyman and his work with CIRS. It's when there's a cascade of inflammatory process that happens where the immune system has just gone crazy. Typically, people have, you know, one of 9 primary different genetic makeups. And there's now actually a test that shows when a gene is literally turned on, not just that they have the gene, and it's activated, and people become insanely sensitive to things like mold, as well as many, many other things. But every time they're exposed to mold, which is in almost every public building, most people's homes, you know, under sinks, showers, that sort of thing, can have mold infestations. But typically it starts with either some major event, like I don't know, even playing basketball and hitting your head, or a car accident, or a deep emotional process, a shocking loss, losing all your money, you know, some big emotional event that turns this gene on. And it keeps getting stimulated by things like mold. And it's like this nonstop inflammatory process that starts creating all kinds of seeming autoimmune type responses. But it starts in the brain, not in the gut. And it affects the gut sometimes, oftentimes intensely. But typically, people have so little energy, oftentimes they can't even function for more than an hour. And many times there's something like a spider bite, or fish type of a bacteria, or some major bacterial insult that the body is unable to get rid of because this gene has been activated. 20% of the people have these genes that, you know, if they're activated, really makes things difficult. So, you know, by doing the carnivore diet and taking all the other insults away and starting to do the basics, you know, perhaps somebody can make a huge, huge impact, and then they can reduce this process. But the process is a step-by-step one where you prepare the body and use specific binders to help bind up some of these toxins as they're leaving the body and sending them out to the bowel, that sort of thing. It's very in-depth, you know, and I always say, let's try, you know, working with light energy, the carnivore diet. Let's see how far we can get before we start going into all of this incredibly expensive testing and, you know, and process of working with these 6 to 9 months per section of preparing the body to clear this all out. But people are healing with ALS doing this type of a process.
Cool, cool. Yeah, bring me a link and I'll check that out for him. I love all these new avenues of research. It's so fascinating.
It's
Grace, I think we're gonna have to wind this up soon. The kids are off to bed and they're bouncing around and making a tremendous racket up there. So
they sound like they're having a great time. I heard them.
you
So I just want to thank you so much, and we'll put your website and information. And maybe you might want to send me a link too, Phil.
I've really enjoyed this one. This has been really, really very cool. Thank you so much for inviting me to do this. I'm sure it's not the last time we'll speak.
I sure hope not. Well, may you all be incredibly blessed with miracles beyond measure. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And just may your lives be filled with light, real light, native light, and may it generate the light and deuterium depleted state inside of you. Thank you so much for joining us.